Imagine waking up to a world where every screen still glows, every device still hums, but the invisible rivers of connection that once stitched humanity together have vanished without farewell. No messages load, no searches respond, no clouds remember what we stored in them. It would feel less like a technical failure and more like a sudden cosmic silence, as if the planet itself had exhaled and taken the digital age with it. The shock would not be loud at first, but heavy, pressing into every routine, every plan, every assumption we never realized depended on distant servers and unseen cables. Cities would slow like giant machines losing oil. Offices built around emails, shared drives, and online platforms would freeze in confusion, employees staring at screens that now act like locked doors. Banks, markets, logistics centers, airlines, and hospitals would scramble to revive paper systems long treated like fossils. The speed of modern life would collapse into the rhythm of handwritten notes, landline calls, and face-to-face messengers, revealing how much of our efficiency was borrowed from constant connection rather than human endurance. Commerce would stumble into chaos before it learned to walk again. Online stores, digital payments, global supply tracking, and instant contracts would evaporate, forcing businesses to rediscover physical catalogs, cash registers, and local trust. International trade would become slower, more cautious, and far more expensive, as every transaction would require layers of human verification. Small neighborhood shops might rise again as lifelines, while massive tech-driven empires would shrink, proving that size built on networks is fragile when networks disappear. News would travel by voice, radio, and printed pages, changing not only how fast stories spread but how they are shaped. Without viral algorithms and endless feeds, attention would return to editors, broadcasters, and community storytellers. Rumors would still exist, but they would move like smoke rather than wildfire, giving societies more time to question, confirm, and reflect. Truth would no longer compete with 1,000 flashing distractions, yet it would also lose the instant reach that once exposed injustice within minutes. Education would transform from digital classrooms into living rooms, chalkboards, and libraries thick with dust and wisdom. Students would rely more on teachers' voices and shared books, turning learning into a slower, deeper exchange rather than a race through hyperlinks. Research would take patience, curiosity, and physical travel, reminding humanity that discovery once demanded long journeys and careful observation. Knowledge would feel heavier, not because it is harder to access, but because it would be carried by people instead of servers. Loneliness would change its shape. Without social platforms and constant notifications, many would feel abruptly cut off from distant friends and unseen communities. Yet at the same time, streets, cafes, parks, and homes might fill with conversations again, as people seek connection where they can find it physically. Relationships would be less curated and more complicated, less filtered and more real, growing through shared presence instead of shared posts. Governments would confront both danger and opportunity. Surveillance systems, digital records, and instant communication would vanish, weakening centralized control but also disrupting emergency responses and coordination. Decisions would depend more on local leadership and slower chains of command, pushing power closer to communities. In some places, this could spark cooperation and resilience; in others, it could open doors to disorder, proving that technology had been both a shield and a shortcut. Creativity would surge in unexpected directions. Without streaming platforms and endless scrolling, people might return to instruments, sketchbooks, storytelling circles, and street performances. Art would become something experienced together rather than consumed alone, echoing through neighborhoods instead of headphones. Fame would shrink, but expression would widen, as creativity would no longer chase algorithms but hearts and human applause. Memory itself would feel different. With no cloud backups and social archives, moments would no longer be endlessly stored, tagged, and replayed. Photographs would be precious again, letters would become treasures, and stories would live mainly in voices and minds. Forgetting would return as a natural part of living, and remembering would become an act of intention rather than a digital reflex. Science and medicine would face severe trials before rebuilding new foundations. Data sharing, remote diagnostics, and global research collaboration would be crippled, slowing breakthroughs that once traveled at light speed. Yet laboratories would still exist, and curiosity would not vanish with the internet. Progress would become more local, more experimental, and perhaps more cautious, reminding humanity that discovery does not begin with Wi-Fi, but with questions. Security would take on an older face. Cybercrime would disappear, but physical crime might rise as digital safeguards fade. Identity would be verified by documents and witnesses rather than passwords and biometrics. Trust would once again depend on reputation and community knowledge, forcing societies to relearn the delicate art of knowing who to believe without a database to confirm it. Entertainment would lose its endless buffet and rediscover anticipation. Movies would be events, music would be shared in rooms, and stories would be told with voices instead of screens. Waiting would return, and with it, a strange kind of excitement that modern convenience had erased. Pleasure would feel rarer, but politics would slow, but it would also become more intimate. Campaigns would rely on speeches, gatherings, and printed promises instead of viral clips and targeted ads. Public debate would happen in halls and homes, not comment sections, giving arguments more depth and less noise. Manipulation would still exist, but it would require human effort, not invisible algorithms whispering to millions at once. And in the quiet after the digital storm, humanity would be forced to confront a powerful truth: the internet did not create our intelligence, our emotions, or our hunger for meaning, it only amplified them. Without it, the world would be rougher, slower, and less connected across oceans, yet possibly more connected across tables and doorways. Civilization would not end, but it would shed a layer of speed and illusion, revealing a version of itself that must rely once again on patience, presence, and the fragile, extraordinary strength of human bonds. In this reshaped world, careers would be redefined by what hands and minds can accomplish without digital assistance. Professions once guided by software would return to manual mastery, and forgotten skills would regain honor and necessity. Navigators would read stars and maps, architects would sketch with pencils before building with instinct, and accountants would balance ledgers by sight and calculation. Work would feel heavier, slower, but also more tangible, as effort becomes visible again instead of hidden behind automated systems. Travel would become an adventure rather than a convenience. Without online bookings, GPS, or instant translations, journeys would demand preparation, courage, and trust in strangers. People would rely on signs, local guidance, and shared languages of gestures and goodwill. Borders would feel farther apart, not just in distance but in cultural mystery, turning every trip into a lesson rather than a shortcut. Faith, philosophy, and inner life would take on stronger voices as the digital noise fades. With fewer distractions pulling attention outward, many would turn inward, questioning purpose, destiny, and the direction of their societies. Temples, mosques, churches, and quiet spaces would fill with those seeking meaning beyond broken networks. Spiritual conversations would spread by word of mouth, shaping values slowly but deeply. Innovation would not die, but it would take a different path, driven more by physical invention than virtual design. Engineers would focus on durable machines, renewable energy, and resilient infrastructure that can survive without digital oversight. Communities might invest in localized power, water systems, and transportation, reducing dependence on fragile global chains. Progress would become about survival and stability, not just speed and profit. Children born into this disconnected era would grow with imaginations shaped by direct experience rather than screens. Their heroes would be people they meet, their games invented in streets and fields, their curiosity fed by exploration instead of recommendations. They would learn patience early, understanding that answers are found through effort and conversation. Their world would be smaller in reach but wider in depth. History would begin to move in thicker layers, recorded in journals, libraries, and human memory instead of endless digital logs. What is remembered would depend on what communities choose to protect and retell. Legends might grow faster, facts might travel slower, and storytelling would become a powerful force in shaping identity. The past would feel closer, because it would be carried by living voices. And perhaps, after years or decades, humanity would stop asking when the internet will return and start asking what kind of world it truly wants to build. In losing a vast digital mirror, people might finally look directly at each other, recognizing that connection was never only about signals and screens. It was always about listening, helping, arguing, forgiving, and dreaming together. The end of the internet would not be the end of humanity's story, but a dramatic turning of the page, forcing a civilization to rediscover its oldest power, the ability to adapt, to endure,